You're going to do the MTI? Okay. But there's several other documents, so. Okay.
That's pretty subtle, though,
Mhm.
based on the last.
Mhm. So I have 1 o'clock. And we've only got a 1 hour session, right?
Yeah, we gotta go.
Okay. Do you want me to do the intro or you want to do the intro?
I can do it.
Okay.
All right, welcome to SUIT at IETF 116. Next slide. By Thursday, you've probably seen this a whole lot, but it's the note well. It covers your rights, your privileges, and your responsibilities. Please make sure you are aware of those before you contribute by speaking at the mic or sending email to the mail list. Next slide. So please treat each other with respect, and if you want to attack somebody's ideas, that's okay, but don't attack the person. Next. So we do need a note taker. We have someone who said they will watch the Etherpad, but we need somebody to be the primary. Can somebody take notes, please?
Hi, this is Hans. I can take some notes.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have David Wolfmeyer and Akira is back over.
Great. All right, super. And of course, the chat is available through the Medico interface as well. Next slide. So this is the agenda that we sent to the mail list, 2 pages. And are there any agenda bashes before we get started?
Should we confirm who's presenting things? Since we know
Okay.
Akira is presenting number 9 and Hannes is. Akira, you're presenting number 9 and Hannes, you're presenting number 6. And is there somebody that is already on the call that knows that they are doing any of the other ones on here? We have slides for, I think, them, but I have not seen Brendan on yet.
I can do the
What I
merge
think
thing.
we're going to do then is Would you say that again, Hannes?
Oh, sorry. I can talk about 8 as well, if necessary.
Okay. What I think we'll do though is start with your presentation on firmware encryption and hope Brendan shows up.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then you're up.
Hannes, do you want us to present here or do you want to share screen?
Yeah, if you could load the slides, that would be good. Okay, cool. Okay. Good. Okay. Good morning, at least from my perspective. This is the working group document about the encrypted payloads in the SUIT manifest. There were 2 updates since the last IETF meeting. You see the authors, Brendan, Russ, David, and Ken. Next slide. Yeah, there were in fact 2 updates. One because I made an editorial glitch as I submitted it on the submission day. So I luckily noticed it and fixed it right away. But the biggest change occurred in version 10, where I swapped out the HBKE algorithm against the elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman ephemeral static version, which is one that is described in the COSI ROC. of course, alongside, I had to do some editorial reshuffling to make the document more readable. I hope if anyone has had a chance already to read through that new version, that is hopefully easier to read than the versions before. So why was that change made? Unfortunately, as some of you have noticed, those who have also been following the work in the COSI group, there was a little bit slow progress on HBK. Actually, last year we had tremendously slow progress, and there's still a number of open issues. And although I hope that there will be some completion of the work at some point in time, it's many of the other SUIT documents are actually closing sort of end of the life cycle, so to speak, are ready to leave the working group fairly soon or have left them already. So that creates dependencies that are not necessarily desired. The ECDHES, this ephemeral static mode, is specified, as I mentioned. There are some application-specific descriptions that need to be added, of course, that relate to the info field. But I have a few slides to illustrate on how it works, to give you a flavor in case you haven't read that part of the COSI specification. Next slide. So this is sort of my attempt to visualize this. The green box is unrelated to the encryption, of course. This is the classical COSI sign 1. But then the inner boxes represent different layers, and the blue box is the regular COSI encrypt, which is used to potentially encrypt the payload to multiple recipients. Could in some cases also be just one recipient. Then the black box is the actual content that we want to encrypt. That could be a firmware, that could be in the deep case, that could be personalization data, that could be whatever. That's why we called it, we renamed the document, the title of the document to payload rather than firmware, because there are different cases. And this content is encrypted with the content encryption key, with the CA key, KEK. And then for the different recipients, there's another layer, as I would call it, namely the gray box shows the recipient structure, which uses AES key wrap. And that key wrap is there to protect the content encryption key. But in order to encrypt or to protect that and encrypt it, there needs to be this KEK, this other key encryption key, and that one is produced by the ephemeral static Diffie-Hellman exchange. And that's the orange box. So that's the sort of layering in a kind of simplified fashion. It's always nicer to show the COSI payload directly, but unfortunately then it becomes a little bit unreadable because of the size of the font. So that's the layering. There is also an example in the COSI RFC itself. So it's not something. If you read the document, the RFC from the top to the bottom, you may have stumbled across it. Okay, but otherwise, there's like from a conceptual point of view, there isn't much change in that sense, because we are still utilizing a public key crypto algorithm here, and compared to like HBKE, I mean, so that's not different. Yeah, and the features are also not different. Okay, next slide. Yeah, I hope this is just a fragment of the full payload. This is the one illustrating the recipient structure, and sort of the innermost recipient structure, which shows one of the, I would say, contentious points in the discussion in the COSI working group on HPKE, which is the one on how you encode the key. And here you can sort of clearly see that the COSI key structure is just used as is. This is the ephemeral part with the key dy, with the curve parameter, and x and y. X and y can be compressed or a compressed or uncompressed point representation, depending on what your COSI library prefers. There's also the key ID at the end, which indicates whereby the sender indicates to the recipient what public key it used for encryption, and this is optional parameter, but I believe in many cases it would be needed, because otherwise you need to know it from the context. Yeah, in this example, I put it there to make it more obvious. The ciphertext field, which is also part of the recipient structure, and since this is the innermost recipient structure, this is empty, because as shown on the previous slide graphically, the result of this, which is the ECDH derived symmetric key, which is then fed through an HKDF, is actually used in the layer below. Okay, next slide. I hope this is clear. It's the first presentation, obviously. Some details. What is missing to get this sort of out of the door is relatively minor, I would argue. Is namely the description about the info and the AAD input, which is are two parameters to this whole building block. And yeah, so those, if everyone is happy with this approach, then I would be happy to add, sort of make an update to the document to add those description of those two parameters. Is not much, and of course I would also like to give it a try to add it, or at least to propose it to Lawrence's DCOSI library as another method. I don't know if he's in the room and whether he will freak out if I tell him this, but so that's sort of to have that implementation experience as well. Okay, any reaction to this? I can't read the faces from.
He is in the room. He's not looking like he needs to go to the mic.
Okay.
See, Dave Waltermeyer, you want to make a share comment?
Just had one additional comment. Hank, I'm sorry, Hannes, is this issue 12 that's out on the GitHub repo?
Let me quickly look at the GitHub repo.
Because I think there's a proposal on that issue that it's already resolved.
Let me. Sorry about this. I didn't memorize the numbers. The GitHub issues.
I can provide you a link in chat.
Yeah, I see that.
If it's related, we probably want to update this issue just to track the current state.
Yeah, you are completely right that we definitely have to track this. No, this is a different one. And it's actually one that I talked about it at the last IETF meeting in London. This was something Ken and I bounced back and forth because we wanted to make sure that the way to trigger the encryption and to relate it to a specific component, since there may be multiple components in a suit manifest, is as easy as possible. And actually, I believe we need to close this one. We did that with the last update already. Good point. Good that you captured that.
Is the intent to use this repo to track the open issues on the draft?
Yes. And that's why I should close this one.
Yes.
So we should probably open another issue then for the current one.
Yeah, I will do that. I will do that right after the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for spotting
David
this.
Brown.
David Brown. I just want to point out for information for you, Hannes, I have an implementation of pretty much this that we may be able to massage into some kind of example implementation. Just contact me afterwards and we can figure out what would be a good way to deal with that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's interesting news. Thanks, David. Good to see you. Yeah, and happy to talk to you afterwards, right?
Yes.
Okay, there any other questions on this draft? It looks like one small bit of work needs to be done to nail down the additional information that goes into the key derivation, and then we'll be ready for last call. All right, Hannes, let's get that done.
I mentioned in the TEEP working group earlier this week, it was noted that the TEEP protocol draft currently lists this one as a normative reference, but the belief is that it is possible to convert that text to be an informative reference to just not tie the two together and hold them up or whatever. So the TEEP is looking at doing that. But if you have comments on that, bring it up to TEEP, but that's currently the goal.
Okay, I think we'll do number 9 next on MTI.
Hello? Yes. I'm going to talk about the mandatory implementation algorithm for the suit. Yes, please. Just a minute. Let me get my sunglasses. Just a minute.
Are those the MTI slides?
Yes, that's so. Yeah.
Okay.
It says MTI outcomes.
Okay. Well, he can't see it without his glasses.
Yes, I became a co-author with another person. I do not know how to pronounce from Within. I think he works for a semiconductor company. And this happened about 3 days before draft submission. I think that was 13th Monday. Yes. And what really happened was in the last 3 days was people were updating the draft, and we realized how to describe mandatory algorithm, what we going to use for suit and EAT CDDL in the TEEP message. We realized that we already have this METI documentation on the suit working group. So instead of duplicating writing the same similar CDDL, we thought we're going to use this existing one. And in that time, that was somewhere from discussion started with the Brandon and the suit people in some Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We decided to go to change the key exchange algorithms from HPKE to ECDH to be more reasonable at the time for making the draft more finishing in the reasonable time. And yes, please. Next page, please. Yes, this is talking about the purpose of what is SUIT MTI algorithm. So it's not meant to be a large computational fast computer or device. It's meant to be a constraint device and constraint network. Yes, next page, please. Probably this was similar to what Hannes have said in his talk just before us. So it was originally was based on key exchange algorithm based on HPKE, and also and the discussion with the TEEP working group was we are going to finalize, and we like to go to the working group last call soon, and decided to something. It's already in the COSE, in the current situation, is the ECDH-ES. So we decided from it, which might take a long, we really don't know how much it's going to take for the HPKE. So we decided to change it to ECDH-ES. And I'm the person probably made a pull request and changed the draft. And that was sometime on Monday. And I somehow fainted around 11 o'clock because the submission date was on Tuesday, early morning, 4 o'clock something, and was continuing. So I don't think this final pull request went into the submission. So maybe on the data track, it might have the HPKE on it, but if you go to the GitHub, it's already replaced with ECDH-ES. And next page, please. Yes, so other specification needs to reference is SUIT MTI is definitely its TEEP protocol specification. And also SUIT MTI CDO is depends on other CDDO, which is COSE envelope CDDO. And right now we need to still a little bit of a tweak the CDDO syntax error right now. Yes. Next page, please. That's the last one. Yes, yeah, that's it for the MTI.
So, Dave Taylor, looking at just to answer your question, what's actually in the posted draft is ECDH with ES256 and EDGSA, but HPKE with HSS LMS.
That's what's changed in the GitHub.
Yeah, so is the intent that it's ECDH with all of those?
Yes.
Okay, so just the last one is the dangling one. The other ones were changed to ECDH.
Yes.
All right, any questions? All right, let's.
I think as chair, I would love to start a working group last call as soon as the last piece here was fixed up, because this document is holding up the TEEP protocol, which is also wanting to go to working group last call, and so it'd be nice to be able to progress them together.
Yeah, can we get this updated this week? And then we can start a working group last call next week.
Yeah, I will talk to Brendan. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Since we've not heard any other remaining comments or issues with this document other than the ones that Akira just presented.
All right, Hannes, can we go to number 8 then?
Okay. This is the MUD document. There was a an update made to this one. Brendan did that work, and it was done in response to some discussions about how the actual workflow happens. So if you go to the next slide, you see that changes. I can briefly summarize the workflow again that is now in the latest document version. It's a fairly simple document, I would argue, and so I think that's the main sort of value add. But the idea is, and I think that can be quite a powerful mechanism. So the concept is that if you start off with the device onboarding, and of course there are a number of different onboarding mechanisms from the FIDO, FDO to whatever your favorite mechanism is, and nowadays they also provide attestation alongside that process. And this, as part of this attestation, the manifest is reported to the MUD manager, and then the manifest may be directly sent, or it may be as a whole, or it may be severed as the manifest document says, so it's stripped with because of size reasons. But the MUD manager has the possibility to actually fetch the complete bundle, and thereby it has then also a possibility to learn on what software is actually supposed to run on a device. And so, of course, he can then verify the manifest as well once it has it. Of course, every time the device reboots and redoes that attestation, it can then report that information as well. So that's I think that's the main difference to what sort of other techniques for MUD distributions have been provided is this one, where the information is carried along the SUIT manifest rather than, for example, sending the data in, let's say, just sending it the MUD file over DHCP or some other mechanism. So it's definitely a stronger technique, and also the person creating the MUD file, namely the firmware developer, is probably in a good possession or capability to write, or at least know what communication possibilities the device has based on the software it has written. So providing the same set of information from the same source appears to be an attractive approach. So this is what the document says, and it has an extension to SUIT, of course, to have that MUD information or the URL included, but it's a single entry, so that keeps the document fairly minimalistic in that sense. So it's a short document. I'm just scanning on how many pages, like I would say maybe 10 or so. I don't see a page count, but yeah, so that's why Brent and I believe that this should really be ready for a working group last call.
Okay, I know preparation for today. I read the document. I didn't see any problems. Does anyone have any concerns with this document, or does anyone have any reason why it should not go to working group last call? Okay.
Just make a comment here. We have a bunch of documents that we hope are all ready to go to working group last call. This is the one that the TEEP protocol does not depend on, and so if we had to stagger them in some way to not do all the working group calls at the same time, then this one may be at the tail end, even if I think it's ready for working group last call. So.
That makes complete sense. Let's see which ones we can get, right? Ken, are you in the room? We're looking at trust domains. Ken, are you able to present on this? Because Brendan has not showed up.
Brendan says, sorry to that I've arrived now.
Ah, awesome. What timing? All right, Brendan, you're up for trust domains.
Brendan, do you have audio? And do you want slide control? It says Brendan offline.
Go ahead.
This is Hank speaking for Brandon. He is in a difficult internet access situation and might have unstable internet.
Yes.
That's why I highlighted that I can do
Yeah, we'll
other
jump
thing.
to that while he tries to
Yeah.
figure it out.
He did let us know that he was at a spotty network area.
Yeah. So
Okay, so why don't we jump to suit report while he tries to find a spot where he can get better net.
Suit report. And this is another one that TEEP depends on. In case somebody's keeping track of which ones are the dependencies, but
I know somebody is keeping track.
at least one of the chairs is.
now it's on. Was this off all the time?
That could be.
Okay, sorry, remote attendees. It's now on. Hi, I'm not Brandon. I am Hank. This is our report on suit report. Next slide, please. And now Brandon is in the queue. Brandon, do you have a question?
The question is whether my audio is
Or do you-
actually going to work, and it seems like it does now. Okay, good.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to take over? I will yield the floor for you, if you like.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to take over if that's easier. I realized I roped you in a little bit last moment there, Hank. So I'm happy
All right,
to do
since
that
we
if
were
that's
just starting suit report, would you rather do this or trust domain first?
I'm happy either way.
All right, suit report slides are up. Do them.
All right. So there's a couple of things that have come into the suit report in this revision. Now, specifically, the two key things from the last meeting were that there was a question about IANA considerations and a question about expanding security considerations, particularly around the topic of encryption of the suit reports. So that's been expanded a bit. I've also added a proposal for how we're going to interwork with RATs, and that consists of two components. The first is a COAP content type, and the second is a proposal for exactly how we embed in EAT. Next slide, please. So first off, co-op content type. I think that this is actually useful regardless of whether or not we have an EAT token involved in the reporting process. So the first part, of course, is that we're going to transmit this from a manifest processor to some kind of management system, and that's probably going to be done via COAP or another similar communication medium. So that being the case, we probably need a content type to embed. And the second point is that if it's going to be transmitted inside an EAT token, well, in that case, we're hopefully going to be able to use that content type to construct the right claim in EAT. So that's, I think on that basis, it makes sense to have a content type for this document. Next slide, please. So my proposal for what we do with the suit report in EAT is that we embed it in a mesres object. The mesres object has a definition that seems compatible with what we want to do, And it looks like from the CDL, it looks appropriate as well. And since it's described as a software measurement, and suit reports are effectively a software measurement, so I think this makes a lot of sense. Now, I did get a question about whether I've reached out to the SCIM group about whether this is the right thing to do. And to be fair, I haven't. I read the suit. I read the EAT description, and it looked right to me. So I wrote that down. If we need to get SCIM feedback, then that's going to be the next step. So if there's any feedback on that, that would be good. And if not, then I'll go on to the next slide.
Yeah, in the TEEP case, I don't think TEEP has a strong opinion here, just because in the TEEP case, the suit reports are not embedded inside the EAT. They're sent in parallel to it, and that's because the TEEP protocol can be used with or without attestation, and so you can't require them to be inside EAT, so there's a field to put them alongside, and because it's alongside, then you don't have to put them in EAT because you got an alternative channel that goes, in this case, to the relying party, which is the TAM, which is what's trying to consume them. So that's why I don't have an opinion on this one.
Okay, so no strong opinion from suit, or from TEEP, I mean, on the use of suit reports. Hank?
Yeah, you cannot see this, but I'm looking at Lawrence, and I want to ask, are you okay with this? He's nodding. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm going to qualify that as having talked to the SCIM group. Maybe that's overselling it a little bit, but anyway, I still think this makes sense. So let's go on to the next slide, please. In the IANA considerations, I've started filling that out. Specifically, the things that are going into IANA considerations are a CBOR tag and COAP content type for both the suit report and the suit reference, but also what I'm looking for is a new table for on the suit page for capability report extensions, which are something that may come up in the future if people extend the suit manifest. And this is to extend the capability reports that were introduced for IETF115. That was something that had always been an action item in suit and had been addressed up to that point. It seemed to make sense to bundle that together with the suit report because they're both reporting related tasks. So putting capability reports and suit reports together, page for capability reports as well. Next slide, please. Or, I mean, table, not page. All right, so on the security considerations, I suspect this is the more contentious part of this. There are two overall considerations. The first is that suit reports have to be authenticated. If they're not authenticated in some way, they don't actually mean anything. You might be able to use them for debugging, but if you don't know that you're getting the data your device sent back, then I'm not sure how good they are to you. They may need to be confidentiality protected. There are questions about exactly what kind of personal information could be exposed by sending a suit report. And the idea here is that under some circumstances, in some applications, we may need to encrypt suit reports for confidentiality reasons. And where that's necessary, there's some guidance provided. So essentially, the guidance is either we need to provide secure transport or we need a cozy message. Now, there is a corner case here that we haven't talked about much. And the corner case is where the suit report is being consumed by some entity other than the verifier. And in that scenario, the suit report is going to be something that the verifier doesn't need to see. And if the suit report is unencrypted within an encrypted EAT token, then what we're doing is exposing privileged information to the verifier that they don't actually need. So by the principle of least privilege, we should at least consider the possibility that there are use cases where a suit report needs to be encrypted even when it's within an EAT token that is also encrypted. And I think that is the end of the security considerations and the end of what I have to say about suit reports for now.
Okay, so Brendan, now that the coordination has just occurred in the room here, how long is it going to take to get a document that's ready for working group last call?
Well, I think the big question is whether the those IANA considerations and the security considerations are filled out adequately. I think that we're pretty close. I suspect that the IANA considerations need a little bit of tweaking because, frankly, I'm just not used to doing them yet. I think Dave was in the queue first.
You could reach out to help.
Yes, absolutely, including one of my co-authors.
Dave Taylor. So what you presented, it looks fine, but I do have a question as to whether an additional change is needed to a different document here. And here I'm looking at the may need to be confidentiality protected. Okay. If we say that, then presumably we want to say with which algorithms. I observe that the MTI document is called Mandatory to Implement Algorithms for Authors and Recipients of Software Update for the Internet of Things manifests. So in other words, right now it's about the manifest processor. This is encryption in the opposite direction. And so my question is, because we had this conversation in the TEEP working group that says, can't we just use the same algorithm unless somebody tells us, oh no, something is highly asymmetric, right, with the encrypt versus the decrypt. That's the only case that I can think of is if you have a particular algorithm that you want it to be different. But otherwise, if we can just, the TEEP working group would love to just refer to suit MTI for both directions. And suit MTI as a title is currently scoped only one direction. And my question is, if this is correct, then can we change the title of the MTI document?
There is an issue with that. The specific issue is signing with HSS LMS. Up until we get to that point, it's absolutely fine. But when we're asking devices to sign and the suit MTI says HSS LMS, then the reverse direction for suit reports starts to become a problem. So I guess the question, remember the first thing was they must be authenticated. So if that authentication is done with HSS LMS, then that is going to be a hard sell. So I'd happily take feedback from the room on how to handle that properly. But my initial instinct is that the reason that suit MTI is the way it is because it is an asymmetric problem, and going in the opposite direction, we have a different set of considerations.
I agree with your assessment, but I think we can put some small wording in the document so that ECDSA is good for the other direction.
I was actually thinking that it might make more sense to use Cozy Mac or an AEAD and use ECDH ES key derivation.
Oh, ECDH. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
The certificates work out different, but it would work.
I just figured that way you get...
My meta comment is that, do you agree that the MTI document is the right place to cover the mandatory to implement in the processor to, outside direction, regardless of what the content is, which we can work out or whatever, because if so, this affects the MTI last call, but the TEEP document actually depends on both of them, so it doesn't care, right? The dependency is the same regardless of which document, so.
Yeah, so the risk here is that MTI means MTI, right? And when this, in its security considerations, gives you two choices, and one of them is to use an existing secure transport that you've got, rather than necessarily wrapping in a cozy message, then putting the mandatory to implement down where you're not actually using a cozy message and you're using that secure transport. I mean, we've got situations like that already, like when you're not using encryption, but encryption is specified in the MTI. I guess there's a question as to whether we're going to over-specify this.
Okay, Hank?
Yeah, my comment relates to that secure transport and to convey a UCCS have similarities here. And if referring to the security considerations in UCCS is helpful, that should be checked. I think the asymmetric authentication problem with a secure transport exists here also. I do not know if it's really relevant. Also, that must be checked. That is an answer to the question, how long does this take? Because I think security consideration is basically the only thing that has to be checked. IANA, I think, is fine.
Okay. So we need to check whether UCCS has an overlap with security considerations.
No, Hannes, you still in queue?
Yes. Yeah, I was trying to summarize what risk Brendan sees, and I wasn't able to capture that. Is the risk that there is too much encryption? Is that the risk?
No, the risk is that we overspecify and we, mandate that there has to be a particular encryption algorithm used, and there isn't an encryption. There isn't any encryption for that. And I guess, like I said before, we already have that scenario, so it's probably not actually a problem. I guess we just need to specify that when a SUIT report is being sent over secure transport, it's not mandatory to implement those algorithms because it's already being handled in a different way. I think I take your point, Dave. I guess this probably does need some explanatory text in the SUIT MTI document. I don't think that that's going to have to be huge. I think there is I'm only aware of one edge case, and the edge case being the HSS LMS. There is an open question for me as to whether we should be doing ECDH with Mac, or whether we should be going, that doesn't give us repudiation, which might be a concern. So that might not be the right answer. Maybe we should just stick with ECDSA. So I think that's the answer, is we have to put this into SUIT MTI, which is unfortunate, but I think it's going to be largely a straightforward exercise to do that. I don't think it's going to take long.
Okay. If there's no other comments, we can go on to the next draft. Trust domains.
Hannes, is that new hand?
That's number 4. Right, go ahead, Brendan. Unless somebody else is doing trust domains.
Yeah, I'm happy to do this. I'm also happy if Ken wants to present. So I'll wait for a moment, and if Ken doesn't jump on, then I'll go ahead. Okay, I'll go ahead. Next slide, please.
He was on his way up.
Oh, was he?
He's on his
Okay,
way up,
okay,
but
then
saying go ahead.
But he says, you do it.
It's okay. I'll do it. Unless, it's always better for someone in the room to present if they can, but if Ken wants me to do it, I'm happy to do it.
Do it.
All right, here we go. Next slide, please.
Okay, 10 minutes. Keep it.
So again, the summary is pretty straightforward. We've added an explicit check for dependency integrity, added a self-reference component ID. It's a terrible name, but it's not named that in the document. That's just my attempt to explain what it is. And we've fixed the dependency resolution sequence key. Next slide, please. So in the previous version of this draft, the manifest processor needed to keep track of which component was a manifest and which was a firmware image or configuration or what have you, and choose how to process integrity checks based on that. And that was a little bit complicated. So this changes it and requires the manifest itself to specify what kind of validation it's using. And this is just because to validate a manifest, you have to validate and you've got to pick out the digest and then digest the manifest component itself, not the whole envelope. So if what you've got here is a manifest envelope in your image and you want to verify that because it's an integrated dependency, for example, then you need a way to do that without necessarily having to have the manifest processor keep all that logic for choosing internally. So this is the technique for doing that. Now we just divide it into two separate commands, and that should simplify the logic for the manifest processor a bit. And this was based on feedback that came from the hackathons, and I think the hackathon at IETF115 was where this came up and was raised as an issue. So we've added that in. Next slide, please. So this one, I've called it a self-reference component ID in this slide. That's not what it's called in the document. In the document, it's called the manifest component ID. The idea behind this is that when the manifest was originally created, there was this ingrained assumption that the root manifest was going to be the first thing received, and that a device would know exactly where to put that because it knew that it was the root manifest. And that's fine as far as it goes, but it doesn't deal well with systems that have multiple independent root manifests. And that's going to be an issue in TEEP and in a variety of other scenarios where you have independent applications being installed. So the idea here is to provide a place that the system should know to be able to use to store the manifest that it receives that it doesn't fetch. And so that's the idea here. We've got this, this component ID that allows the receiving system to store the manifest to a particular location without having to guess or know in advance what that location is. Now, there's obviously a question that stems from this, which is if my dependency contains one of these, what happens? How do we decide between what the dependency says it should be stored at and what the dependent says it should be stored at? And the answer here is that the dependent gets to choose where its dependencies are stored. Obviously, this raises some questions about malicious dependents. And so far, the best answer I've got to that is that particular storage locations, component IDs, can have permissions associated with them, much like a file system. Except instead of having a user that gets to choose where to store things, it's the person or the entity that authenticated the manifest that gets to decide what permissions that manifest has. So this allows us to control what gets to be stored where. And that's the part of it that's going to have to handle this overriding or defend against malicious overriding. And it's possible that we need to add a bit in the security considerations to explain that. But I think there's already a bit of a description of it in the component ID section. Next slide, please. Oh, no, that's it. That's the last one.
So same question as the last document. When do you think this one will be ready for working group last call?
Well, I'd appreciate another look over it. Like I said, it might need a small update to the security considerations, but otherwise I think it's done.
So a month?
Can we get any reviewers and see what they say?
That, okay.
Last call is one way to force that.
Well, that's exactly what I
Well,
was
that's fair.
thinking. As
Yep.
soon as you think
You're
it's
right.
ready, that has been, with this group, the thing that has worked most.
Yep. Okay,
Hannes?
I think it's pretty much done.
Go ahead, Hannes.
Yeah, I was probably a question to Ken. I was wondering what the status is on the implementation side, because there's also this dependency to deep, and Ken has been working on that code.
He's coming to the mic.
Yeah, in the hackathon, for the we had provided tip demo, but it also suit demo actually. And with this self-reference component ID, so in the tip protocol, the agent request a manifest with this component ID. So I implemented device side, so agent request to the STAM server to referencing this component ID and get the component and then stored it in the file system. So it works. Yeah, it's fine. And I noticed that we need another parameters. So before running the component, so the binary should be should have the executable bit in the file system. So we need another mechanism like group user that owned the component, and also there need to be some attributes that executable, writable, and readable for a user or group. So and so on. So we need some parameters like that.
Yeah, I saw your email. You may want to repost that also on the mailing list. I think that's obviously a good observation. Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that.
My question on that is whether it belongs in the multiple trust domains or whether it belongs in update management. To me, it looks like an update management operation rather than a trust domain operation.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I'll post a mail. So let's discuss.
Okay, sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next slide. Then we're going to talk about what we were just talking about, which is the update management.
This one's going to be very short. Next slide, please. So just a reminder of it's a set of commands and parameters that are needed for some update management scenarios. It's almost certainly incomplete. Hey, look, I just suggested new things that we can add to it. It's fine, I think, if it's incomplete, because the whole point of this is that new commands can be added by registering them as extensions as needed. So my big question is, are we done? Well, the answer, I guess, from the previous comment is maybe not. Next slide, please. So just a reminder of what's in there currently. There's the use before condition. Well, these are all conditions except for the last one. So you've got use before checking if an image fails to match a specified image, a minimum battery, a check for update authorization, and a loose version match. And then, of course, the wait for event command. So what we could do there is do the permission and ownership management that that Ken was mentioning. That To me, that would fit well in this document as opposed to the trust domains document. But I also appreciate that the trust domains document is probably closer to last call than this one is, and that those might be useful to have sooner rather than later. And that's all I have for this one.
So based on that discussion we just had at the end of the previous presentation, do you think that should happen first, or do you think we should last call this first?
I'm open to suggestions. I would be happy to put the commands that Ken has mentioned into this one and then send it off for last call. I would be completely happy with that. If we're going to put them in the trust domains document, then I guess then this could, in my opinion, this could go to last call immediately.
What does the author prefer?
What does the author prefer? I'd prefer to keep like with like. So I would personally prefer to put the management commands here. And the reason for this is simply that they don't look to me, the new ones that are proposed, like they are specific to a trust domain scenario. They look like generic management commands. So I would rather put them here. But notwithstanding, yeah, so that's my preference.
Okay, then what I'm hearing is we should working group last call trust domains while you make the updates to this one, then we can do this one. Did I hear it right?
Yes.
All right, then that's what we'll do.
All right, sounds good.
And I think that matches what TEEP needs, because they need trust domains.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep track. Maybe Russ, you've been doing the same thing, right? So I'm just going to summarize what I have, and Russ, please correct me if I'm wrong here. The ones that TEEP depends on, there's 3 normative dependencies and 1 informative, and so it depends on trust domains, which we said we could start working with last call now. It depends informatively on firmware encryption, but it's only informative, so TEEP doesn't care whether that's now or later. Sooner is better, but it depends on suit reports, which we had some discussion about, and that's where I'd asked about the MTI. And my expectation is we'd probably want an update to point to the new MTI document. And so suit reports, I would want another rev that addresses the what crypto algorithms to point to MTI. And we could potentially start working with last call after we see that. And then MTI, we just said it needs some updates to deal with the other direction. And so hopefully suit reports and MTI would be simultaneously updated to match that, and we could work with last call those at the same time. Those are the ones that TEEP depends on. The ones that TEEP does not depend on is update management, which I think we just said to have another rev to add the commands.
Yep.
As well as MUD, which is ready anytime. We could start a working group last call anytime that the chairs choose to. Am I missing anything?
That's exactly what I got.
Hopefully the note taker has that too.
Right. In fact, you could probably send that to the group as a plan.
Yeah, we didn't capture that in the notes, so it'd be good to have that.
So
Exactly.
So it's for the meeting minutes. So we have TEEP depending on trust domains, firmware encryption, suit reports, and MTI. But you want to start the working group last call with trust domains first?
Because there's no known changes to that one. It's ready right now. The other ones all had something that we talked about here that we want to see the next version of, and then we'll start the working with last call on that.
Correct. And Hannes, you have to update the firmware encryption as well.
Yep.
For the additional info. Okay, that was the last presentation. Is there any other business? Oh, Hannes is in queue.
And then I have a question.
That was a mistake. Sorry.
So just like the question was for Ken on the one document, out of the other ones that we're working with last calling, can somebody summarize which of the documents are the ones that were implemented in the hackathon, right? The suit demo, how many of these different documents were part of that demo? Can we just enumerate out of these ones we talked about today, which ones were part of the demo and which ones were not, or at least which ones were part of the demo? So we know manifest, which that one's already in the ISG. Which other ones were part of the demo? I guess that's a question for Ken, probably.
Well, if you want us to call them out, you say yes or no.
Right.
If that would be easier.
I've tested in the hackathon the suit manifest, of course, suit manifest, and also multiple trust domains, because it uses self-component ID. But I've never tried that dependency. So I have to do that in 1 month.
Okay. So just
Give
to
me
check,
1 month.
you said trust domains, yes.
Yes.
Update management?
No.
No. Okay.
Yep.
Firmware encryption?
No.
No. Okay. Suit reports?
No.
Okay. MUD, I think no on that one. And then MTI indirectly, yes. 'cause you have
Yeah,
the protocol.
partially. So because just parse it, but
Yeah, part of it,
I've
yeah.
never used
Because
the parameters.
MTI specifies multiple profiles, right? You had to do
Yes.
one profile, not the other ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dave Brown said he did firmware.
Eventually, we want to collect this information, and so I'm hoping the note takers can put this down, because at some point we'll get to a need for a Shepherd write-up, and then that's one of the questions in the Shepherd write-up is which ones are actually implemented. So just checking now, and then maybe next IETF, if we have like working group last call results to go over, then if we can have the like hackathon report, sort of implementation status stuff, just to help fill in the Shepherd report.
Right. If these updates can be made quickly, there'll be very little to do at the next meeting. Hannes.
Yeah, I was wondering how much work is actually needed to also test the encryption functionality, because we have at the hackathon, the last one, well, actually for some time we have the functionality in DCOSY, for example, the AES key wrap, which we could test on with the manifest. So I wonder whether there's really much missing, or whether it's just sticking it together and then trying it out.
Well, that's essentially what David Brown said he'd already done.
Was David here?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I will
spoke earlier.
probably I should talk to David.
He's coming back.
afterwards.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
go
good,
ahead.
good.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, David Brown. I will talk with Hannes in more detail about that. But I mean, basically, I have an implementation of using COSY with the ECDH and AES key wrap to protect a payload. It was developed for a different application, but it's pretty much the same data, so it should be easy to massage into what we need for this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
And sorry, Hannes,
But I still-
Lawrence
Yeah.
left the room, so he won't answer about T-COSY.
No problem. But I think I will also get together with Ken after this meeting and try to figure out whether there's anything specifically that has to be done to enable the encryption support in his libc suit library.
Okay, or is there any other business?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I make you waiting a long time, but give me a time to do that.
Any other issues or comments before we close the meeting?
All right, thank you.
How's it going? I've seen you walk past a couple of times. You were deep in conversation. It usually is. Not too bad. I what